What do you think life has been like over the summer for like the Sirianni family as they're just trying to get away? And if you're flipping through the TVs and it's all about like, oh, is dad going to keep his job? Like, that stuff is interesting.
I hear you there. And there's a part of me that's empathetic, right? Like I imagine that's tough. There's another part of it that's, this is the business they chose, right?
They get paid handsomely for this. Like this is,
but like like they know it when they get into it, and so
sure.
it's the Bum Phillips quote. You're either been fired or going to be fired, right? There's two types of coaches. But
not enough people named Bum these days.
No, I guess not. I haven't really thought about that, but you're right. No, it's a good observation because it is the dominant topic. And when Les was on last Monday, we discussed this. Les Bowen, when he was on last Monday, we discussed this. And I framed the question to Nick, like, is this job wearing on you because of that type of conversation? Like there's a part of Nick that, I think looks at this, and I wrote this the other day. He's been to the playoffs all 3 years. He's been to the Super Bowl, 2 double-digit win seasons. Like, come on, But it's also, you're the coach of the Eagles. You have an insane amount of talent here. Like this is the job you signed up for. This is the fan base you signed up for. And when you win, Doug Peterson is forever like beloved here. There's a statue outside the stadium. The Eagles didn't commission it, but there's a statue outside the stadium. So yeah, now the stories will continue to change. I think, like you mentioned, when you're in that 6-week period, and we're guilty of this too. I don't want to act, everyone needs something to talk about. Everyone needs something to write about. When I talked about my excitement for training camp last week, one of the things I said is like storylines replenish. There's things new. For 6 weeks and really 6 months here, this has kind of been going on, and so soon enough we'll have games and practices and things of that nature to discuss.
Yeah, I just think it's like in the middle of the season, if this conversation is going on, it's much easier to tune it out, I would imagine, from Sirianni's perspective. You have a job to do, but like in the middle of the summer when like this is your time to get away, and this is a guy who he's like a sports aholic, right? Exactly. He's probably watching ESPN or whatever all day long, and he just a conversation about like how good you are at your job. It's just kind of funny to think about. Like what if like you're driving to work and like the nonstop conversation like Zach Berman sucks. Like
honestly,
let's get this guy out of here.
I would be listening to it. I would be engaged.
You would?
For sure, yeah.
But people have no idea what they're talking about.
It's like Andy Reid getting the play from the janitor. You never know if someone has an idea. It's the line from Rudyard Kipling: "If all men count with you, but none too much." That's
really.
Yes, it is. Like you don't take everyone's word as like the only word, but you listen to everyone. The reality is, I go back to the Jason Kelce line. You write your own narrative, right? This is what's being discussed now. If Nick wins, this won't be talked about, and if Nick loses, this is going to be talked about. So now, a coach isn't having the same. A player's kind of more directly writing it, but yeah. You write your own narrative here. Ultimately, we write what happens. They control what happens.
I also think he would probably say he doesn't mind it as much as it's like the family, right? That's
exactly.
What you would always hear,
right?
Right?
100%. And kids in school, I imagine, and other moms. This is. I feel for that. It's also you hear these coaches. They live in like 6 places in 6 years, right? It's a tough industry. Like it's fun, I imagine, but it's a tough industry.
Now, what did you make of the substance of the reporting from Diana Rossini?
Yeah, well, first off, Diana's outstanding at her job. Always has been, is now.
And boy, what a producer for that podcast.
Absolutely. Shout out to Marissa. So my understanding, so it really depends on how you interpret what she was saying. I, from my understanding, Brian Johnson was calling the plays, but Brian Johnson wasn't calling his plays. So I don't know. I haven't spoken to Diana about this report. Nick has been on the record in the past saying like he's in charge of the offense. Nick said when we spoke to Nick in June, and let me pull the exact quote up here. Nick said that I didn't call plays. I know everyone thinks that. I didn't call plays last year, all right, but I had to help. I wanted to help with that. It was my expertise of helping, just like it was in 21, and just like it was in 2020, and just like it was in 22. He continued. I felt a mistake that I made was focusing so much on the offense, basically. And he said, and that's not what's best for the team, and what's needed for the team is me to be the head coach, not the offensive coordinator, for multiple reasons. Brian Johnson was not calling his offense last year. Brian Johnson was calling Nick Sirianni's offense, and I think Nick had a heavier hand than maybe he had the year before with Shane, when him and Shane had a more of a history together, if you will, and when things are going bad. But I think Nick kind of wanted to put his finger on the scale. I believe that Brian Johnson was calling the plays now, but I also believe that it was Nick Sirianni's plays.
Yeah, there's also a distinction between Nick Sirianni is saying in the week leading up to the game plan, like if we're in the red zone,
yes,
these are the 4 plays I want you to call.
Exactly.
And then Brian Johnson gets to choose from those 4.
Exactly.
That's a little bit different than even if Nick. And there were times where on the sideline it did look like Nick was calling plays every now and then. So I'm sure that there's a little bit of truth in between here.
Sure.
And you also have to think about the motivations of the people who would have been talking to Diana about if there's someone from Brian Johnson's camp who wants to make it known that he doesn't have the stink of that offensive diminishment on him, that's fine. But I mean, it's obviously true. You just think about the interpersonal dynamics of it. Like if Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni are not as close, they don't have as much history as he did with Shane Steichen, right? So if he thinks that he's coaching for his job, he's going to do what he thinks Nick wants. And if Nick wants certain types of plays, those are the plays he's going to call. It's also the offense that Nick installed.
I just see in the chat they clarified the article from Johnson wasn't calling plays, that Johnson wasn't calling his own plays, which is the distinction we made there. And you hit it on the head, right? Brian Johnson probably wants it out there to be known that he did have his hands tied. And when Brian Johnson was fired, we kind of said as much too. So that part of it. The other part of Diana's report podcast, she has a podcast, Scoop City, with Chase Daniel, where this was on, and it was said in there that this is like Howie Roseman's show. Yeah, I can tell you that this is Howie Roseman's show. I mean, Howie Roseman's more involved than most GMs are. I've used this maybe on this show, but certainly in conversations with others. If you follow other sports, Howie Roseman is more like a baseball GM than a football GM in that baseball GMs are like the all-powerful, baseball GMs control basically everything in the organization, right? And that's kind of what Howie is here. He has his hands in a lot of different areas. He's not just scouting and picking the players. I mean, everything kind of funnels up to him, and that's the way this is structured. Now, Nick does not report to Howie. Nick reports to Jeffrey Lurie. That's the structure that's been in place since Andy Reid was here. But Howie, they're not hiring coaches without Howie Roseman having say in this, right? And certainly in these situations, strong say in this. And then also in that report, I thought the most interesting part of it, frankly, I know the play calling thing got a lot of attention, but was just the Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni dynamic. And this is something you've been harping on, and you're absolutely right. This is going to be a major topic, and it should be. Jalen Hurts needs to be better this year, but Jalen Hurts is the most important person in the organization. And Nick, when we talk about kind of the buy-in that Nick needs from the team, Nick needs buy-in from the quarterback. And that can't just be implicit. That needs to be explicit. Like that, I think those in the locker room need to see that Jalen believes in the coach.
Do you think we will see some kind of outward show of, some big ceremonial bro hug on the first day of practice or something like that? Because I don't. And not even because I think that there's a lot of smoke to that relationship. Just what I know about Jalen Hurts, I feel like the idea that everybody is telling him that he is not doing enough here, he is the kind of person, I believe, who's going to only take that and come 100%. Even more in his shell about that. You don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing to see here. He's only going to get more defensive about that.
Agree with you wholeheartedly there. Agree with you. I think that's why we go back to that answer that was unnecessary. But I think that was more Jalen against the media than it was Jalen about Nick. It was like, I don't need to play along with your narratives here, and we'll see. I mean, Jalen will speak on Wednesday. I imagine this is going to come up. We will see. But yeah, this dynamic is important because, look, I'm not saying this is going to disintegrate or anything of that nature, but it would not be the first high-profile a quarterback and successful head coach who, over time, like a marriage, kind of grew apart. So Nick needs to nurture this marriage because it's essential, frankly, to his future, and it's essential to the team's success.
We all silly like the mayor.